Hi, this is part two of the three-part lecture on the quantified future was always scarce as a part of the transformation series for the Schloss Solitude Academy. My name is Nishant Shah, and I'm the professor of aesthetics and cultures of technology at ArtEZ University of the Arts in the Netherlands. In the first part of this three-part lecture, I talked about the conflict between probability and possibility, between logic and mathematics, between machinic certainty of the past and the human uncertainty over the future as one of the ways by which our futures are being labeled as fake, leading to what I am calling constant catastrophization because of computational counting. In this second part, I'm going to make this abstract claim perhaps more tangible by taking us through a particular story of verification and machinic probability and how it negotiates with human agency and the realm of possibility. I'm going to begin with a story from India. Aadhaar, which is the Hindi word for support, is one of the largest biometric databases in the world and is currently the backbone of the e-governance strategies of India. With more than 970 million records and growing, it has been at the heart of many controversies around privacy, safety, security, surveillance capitalism, profiling, punishment, exclusion, and even deportation, as different bodies and communities get deeply identified through the database and algorithmic logics. I'm not going to go into a critique of Aadhaar and its terrible consequences in the hands of a neo-fascist, authoritarian, xenophobic government in my country right now. So it's a good thing to keep at the back of our heads because systems like Aadhaar are not just about governing the present, but also shaping the future. However, I do want to pull out a story from Aadhaar that's comical and frightening from its early days of deployment. Right? So Aadhaar, which is a verification system that confirms that you are who you are by reading your biometric data, had this one particular occurrence. A community in Nurpur at the Diamond Harbour in Kolkata in West Bengal uh, woke up one day to be told that they are dead. Due to a database glitch in the process of server migration, a large range of people were marked dead in the biometric database. As they proceeded to live their normal life, they suddenly found a cascade of events that had them spinning out of control. There were people who had their communication services suspended, people who found that their credit and bank cards were not working, people who got notifications that their pensions had stopped, people who started getting mail from insurance companies and funeral services. There were people who started getting told to their face by other people behind computers that despite all evidence, they were dead. This is what I call death by database. Even when the people with the cards that declared the dead went in person to claim their life and identity, they were summarily discarded as dead. Their real, alive bodies were not proof enough to endorse their being alive, and they had to go through a complex process of reinstalling themselves as alive. It sounds like a science fiction dystopia, which even ended in acts of violence, protests, and vandalism. And in some ways, it just sounds darkly funny. But in many ways, this is also characteristic of the future that's being scripted for us by probability-based algorithms. And behind this is perhaps one of the most significant computational principles, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. GIGO tells us that if a computer makes mistakes, it's because the human coder who fed in the data made a mistake. In a GIGO universe, if 1 plus 1 is equal to 3, then the programmer goofed up, whereas the computer was only processing the badly written code. In these instances, there is very little recognition of the fact that self-learning and correlative algorithms engineer responses that might be architected by human programmers, but are actually operated without human control or consent. In the case of the Aadhaar cards and the death by database phenomenon, it was obvious that the decisions were made on pattern recognition, where the possibility of the human truth was overridden by the probability coded within the computational networks. This is the quantified future. That which is counted and hence always presented as scarce. Scarce not as a resource, but scarce because it rejects the realm of the possible to only look at the literal and the factual. This is also the reason why we are now entering into the debate of real future versus fake future, because we see two different registers of making meaning, of being alive, which are present when the human experience and the machine verification are two different things. So it begs the simple question: who contrives the moment of truthiness in computation? The promise of the digital is to know the human entirely, completely, intimately, and to propel us into the Silicon Valley-driven bravado of a technological singularity. That quest for immortality that proposes conversion of human beings into data, which can be off-sourced onto a silicon-based life form, thus making us live beyond the durability of our biological bodies. In order to achieve this singularity, we must give ourselves to the digital networks with abandon and without discretion. In this willful submission, sometimes presented as a cyborg fantasy, we find ourselves achieving the promise of being known in our pure form. In that moment of singularity, our bodies will be made fake, pretentious, and unreliable entities that do not do justice to the lofty self that occupies it. It's a promise that one day we will truly be liberated from the last fake block of our existence, the body that holds us back from being ideal versions of ourselves. It's a proposition that the bodily future is a fake one, and what we need is the moment of dissociation through the digital, where we granulate ourselves into multiple blocks for the real and the fake, seeking to flee one and fill up the other. The threat of the digital is to know the human entirely, intimately, completely, without letting us know how we are known and what happens to the knowledge of it. The Aadhaar card example shows how the human performs to the machines and scripts of artificial intelligence without having any knowledge of the machine logic, logistics, and impulses. As we commit more data, information, and memories to the infinitely expanding capacities of storage, we push our bodies towards their endurance thresholds. Not only do we not know about how we are known, but also lose control on what can be known of us. The digital becomes threatening to the bodies that cannot bear the mark of digitalization, bodies that will be indeterminate and illegible, and sometimes alive but dead. So this is how our futures become scarce, as the possibilities of our bodies are converted into the probabilities of the machine. The time and space which make sense of our bodies in the here and the now get computed as unstable and eventually erased as the body is computed as data no longer subjected to the vagaries of time and space. This gives rise to the idea that computational data streams are endlessly subject to manipulation and rendering, morphing and forking into new shapes without any consideration given to the bodies that have their futures prescribed and foreclosed in their attempts to make other kinds of possibilities. In the third part of this 3-lecture series, I'm going to discuss not only the ways in which our bodily futures are being looked upon as fake because they cannot be verified or counted by technologies that can only look backwards and not forwards. I'm also going to start thinking about what happens when our body gets replaced with machines which seem to think and mimic that they are also human beings.